So first of all, welcome everyone, and welcome Sky to join our session as the speaker. I'm so excited to have you here today. So today's main topic is around how AI support and move into our life into the art and then the branding areas. But first of all, Peter, do you want to
Yeah,
talk a little bit about like Acrotel?
cool. Sounds good. So, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the AcroDot events. We are a network and also kind of a platform to help really help designer and other professionals to grow themselves, right? Like so to have career and professional development. And one of our key I would say slogan or our belief is that we see a lot of classes online, but one thing we feel like is missing is like the actual human connections and learn from each other. So we are prioritizing human connections, sharing experience and like sharing stories. For example, we invited Sky for today's session and really cultivating environments where you can grow within this community and also learn from each other. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. We have a website. We also have a lot of podcasts, YouTube, and you can follow us on Luma, LinkedIn. We have all sorts of like social media. We'll post our events and upcoming podcasts on there.
So, Sky, is your show time. So I'll
Oh,
let Sky to introduce herself a little bit and then talk about her experience around AI art and branding.
Wonderful. Well, my name is Sky Alsgaard, and I'm the Creative Services Director at the Asian Art Museum. I'm relatively new there. I've been there for about 4.5 months. Thank you. Thank you. I see your claps and your thumbs up. Before that, I was Senior Manager of Brand Design at San Francisco Ballet. And before that, I was a brand designer at San Francisco Ballet, and I had the pleasure of working with Francis there, who actually taught me a ton of design skills, and is one of the more talented designers that I know. And still using the things he taught me today. And I before that, I had a little bit of an unusual background in that I actually worked in the arts before I moved into a digital kind of design space. I come from a family of artists. I worked in galleries as a senior art consultant selling high-end fine art, and then I was a gallery director. And basically, I just realized that had just fallen in love with everything digital. Like I fell in love with websites and email marketing, just this idea of being able to reach into people's homes and really give them the experience of an art kind of environment without them having to leave their homes. So I decided to go back to school. I switched careers when I was 40, so that's a little unusual. And I went back for my master's degree at the Academy of Art University. And I got a degree in web design and new media, Master of Fine Arts. I was a valedictorian nominee, so I took it very seriously. And after that, that's when I got the job at the San Francisco Ballet. And ironically, I was trained in like app development and coding and UX. UX was my biggest kind of where I was really in love with it, but I wasn't a very good designer. And I wanted to become a better designer. So I took the job at the ballet thinking, I'm only going to be there for a year. I just want to learn some design. And I did that. And 6 years later had fallen in love with. Should I just jump into AI, or are you going to ask me some questions, or how?
Yeah, I think if you finish your introduction, I can give you some cue.
Okay, great.
Cool. So first of all, I want to ask you, Sky, how do you think the AI can be enhanced brand storytelling, and how it's going to be affects the visual identity or the brand identity in the current market?
Mm-hmm. Very powerful questions. All I have is my personal experience with it, just running campaigns with the ballet and with the Asian Art Museum. And for me and my own relationship and my own journey with AI, This is very much a tool to use. And now we all say it, but it does not replace the human factor. And I view it as an enhancement to my creativity, not a replacement. It's a very powerful tool, much like the light bulb was or the phone was to our kind of human understanding of the world. And so, because I can only speak with my own experiences, I will talk through some of my experiences using AI in campaigns.
Yeah.
Because it's been really a drastically different experience each time. And the first one was the San Francisco Ballet in 2022. And so the conversation of AI was just starting to come into like the public kind of knowledge. And we used it with an agency. So we, enlisted an agency to help us brand the Nutcracker. They used AI and we were on board. We thought that was great.
So when you collaborated with that external agency, I know we had some relationship with the agency before, but it most likely just giving us some of the brand direction or just like mood board or conceptual ideas. Do you know how they approach the AI role at the beginning when you guys like work together on any specific campaign?
Absolutely. So we started with an idea and kind of like a few words of what we wanted to capture. And I think it was, some of the magic. San Francisco was a big one because the Nutcracker at the San Francisco Ballet takes place in San Francisco. So we wanted to focus it also in San Francisco, magic. I think the other one was like journey. We wanted to take people through this like magical journey. And so we gave them some of our past efforts and we gave them some mood boards. And we also said, surprise us. At the beginning, we weren't expecting AI. So it was, they came back to us with the AI idea and we fell in love with it. One of the interesting things about the experience was it was the first large scale AI branding efforts in the city and definitely in like an arts organization. They kept coming back to us with creative, like specifically in this one area where we wanted to capture this like character. And they kept coming back to us and it was just missing. Every single time it was missing the mark and we couldn't figure out. I didn't understand why. How could you be missing this mark? We're giving you such clear instructions on it. And I only realized afterwards that the reason, well, first of all, they didn't really watch the whole ballet. And I think that was a huge mistake because they missed some of our key moments. And so note to self, always watch all of a program if you're going to be trying to brand it. And it was the prompts. It was AI prompts. They just couldn't get the prompts right for what we were wanting. And they didn't go that extra step of then using creativity to, if they couldn't get it with prompts, they didn't morph it into what we wanted. They didn't take that extra step that I had talked about where it's like, it's a tool, right? You use it up to a point, but then you as an artist or as a creative person, as a designer, you have to take that incomplete asset that you're given and you have to apply your own design skills to it.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting looking back on the experience.
So it sounds like they're kind of skip some of the essential creative process during the survey as well. Like sometimes for a client, you have to know their products really well. And
yes.
For the ballet, you have to watch all those like the performance and how they perform before, and it can affect the performance and the ticket sale as well. So I think sometimes when we prompt the AI, it's like, oh, can you give me some of the context or information about San Francisco Ballet and what kind of the keywords you can get from ChatGPT or any other AI tools. But then it shortened the time efforts, but definitely we lose some of the data point there.
Yeah, I think we had to go through like 7 rounds. And we finally just were like, just use that one. We still left the experience unsatisfied. However, and I will say two things that were really interesting about the experience. And one of which is that, so I want to acknowledge that they probably knew very little about AI as well. You know, this idea of like how to build a prompt, how to craft, how to ask a model, and how to put it in the frame that the model is going to understand what you're saying. So I want to acknowledge that they were new to it, probably. I know they were as well. So, you know, I want to give them some grace that they were new and didn't really understand how to do it as much. But so we received a lot of backlash for this campaign. It was a lot of public scrutiny, a lot of social media backlash. We got national coverage on it in like NBC. And so, however, it was the highest selling Nutcracker that we'd ever had. So whether it was because of the coverage or whether it was because of the successful campaign, we will never know. But it does prove that the public reaction does not always dictate commercial success. And I took a lot from that experience. Sometimes you have to be ahead of the curve and take the first punch, so to speak. Yeah. And we did another campaign after that. It's almost like we had something to prove, and I can talk about that one if you want.
Oh yeah, for sure. Do we get like better revenue based on that?
Yes. So with the second one, we approached it from a much different angle. And I also want to clarify that I always think it's very important to acknowledge that I was not the smartest person in the room making these decisions. I was part of the team, but I was working with some really, really incredible marketing people. Lisa Poppin, who is now the chief marketing officer at the ballet, is just very, very good at what she does and was making very smart decisions. So the second campaign was approached from the point of view, because the first campaign was one of the biggest public outcries was like, you're cutting out the artist. And you are, of course, there's the whole ethical thing of, you know, pulling the data from all the images. So we couldn't do anything about that. But what we could do was we said, okay, even though we are an organization filled with artists, we will use our own art for the second campaign. So what we did was we took images of our dancers, and we worked with a experienced design company called Hamilton Industries. They're in Europe, and they fed those images through their AI model that they had built, and they spit out these really incredibly kind of atmospheric smoke and fabric movement of the dancers. But they were our dancers. It was our photography that was mainly driving the model. The ballet was about Pandora's box, and it was kind of presenting that in a modern take. And I don't know if you're familiar with Pandora's box, but that's the Greek mythology of Zeus gives the box to Pandora and says, do not open that. Nay, don't open it. And she can't help but open it. And what she unleashes all of the evils into the world. Along with the creation of this ballet was the creation of the campaign, because the ballet was a metaphor for AI. What are we doing? What are we unleashing onto the world with AI? You know, who knows? And so then we built the campaign from the perspective, and we used another agency with a Shipyard was their name. They came up with the idea of using AI from the perspective, or presenting the campaign like AI had already taken over. So it was like, look at what these silly humans are doing. It was from the perspective of, look at these small humans attempting to do what we have done already. And it was very successful. We did a lot of wild postings. We did a lot of pop-ups. And it was all kind of morphed together, and it was incredibly successful. We had international coverage, New York Times, and other areas. So it was a much different experience. And we didn't get
Yeah.
any backlash from people because it had become part of it had become so enmeshed already in the conversations that were taking place within the artistic space.
Mm. Sometimes we need to um, have a pretty good budget to hiring like the photographer, set up the studios to make better images, even retoucher, right? Because of AI, we can shorten the budget and we can move things really productive. We'll talk about the really beginning of how to try to integrate the AI into the creative process. But
Mhm.
I'm really curious about during the execution part, like do you find like the AI's roles in there as well? Because sometimes I feel like AI so far is a pretty good starter, but we still need people, we still need the labor efforts to make it work in the real world. So how do you see the AI gonna be play in a different roles in the execution process? Because I'm thinking that could be cause a lot of efforts in the social media as brand.
Yeah. So at the Asian Art Museum, we just are rolling out right now a campaign to celebrate our third Thursday, which is our kind of a night event where we're attracting kind of younger demographic, and we're going to have culture and food and music and art. And so we needed something that would um, capture this idea of coming together, right? The connection. And so for me, the way that I used AI in that campaign was I found some images that I really liked and wanted to use as starting points, right? It's like I like to get inspired by things I find on Pinterest or things I see out in the wild. I'm always taking photos of things, and I fed that into, I use both Midjourney, I use Poppy AI is another one that I often use when I'm building out ideas. And then I also use the one that Freepik has, which I find to be a pretty powerful tool that's not as expensive
Mm-hmm.
per se. So then I use that as a starting point, and I put it in AI and I start to shape it, and I shape it through my prompt. Then I'll export it, and then I'll like edit it, and then I'll reload it back up. And so through this tool of it shaping it and then my own creative process, it kind of volleys back and forth, and then it morphs into the artwork that I want. But I have found it very limiting as an artist, as having this idea of what I want in my head. I have found just putting it into Midjourney and saying, do something like this, or give me the prompt, show me what the prompt is on this, and then try again. That has been a very unsatisfactory for me as an artist. And I think as a designer, it's important to challenge yourself always to use the tool, but make it your own. And it can be really uncomfortable, to be honest. I find that space to be a little bit uncomfortable still, even after all these years. So that's how I would use it usually in my creative process. I use it a lot in my own workflow, in my own campaign creation. I find Poppy AI to be super powerful because you can drag in images and videos and social media, and you can feed them all into your model of what you're looking for. But with all of this, you have to have your own voice in there. With ChatGPT, I'm always, you'll ask it something and it'll spit something out, and it'll be like, "Where art thou?" It gets very like formal and weird,
Yeah.
and so it's all about the prompts for me, which I can talk about later. But and you mentioned using it for data, and that's something that we did at the ballet, and we're just starting to do it at the Asian Art Museum, of really utilizing it a low cost effort to do really big, laborious data crunching, audience stats, audience behavior. That's something that is just starting now.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty interesting part. It's like how people using as a starter, but definitely how it convert into the actual outcome. And then the data is like, it feels like sometimes when people using AI, they didn't really know where to go. It's just like kind of like an exploring process. I don't even know how AI can be generated. And then I think it's really fun. Like this couple of weeks, I'm exploring the AI tool called Lumi. We have the low budget this year as well, so we're not, spending tons of money to the all country shootings, and then we don't hiring the photographer. But then I realized the AI kind of expensive in different way. Like I need to cost the AI credit and then to generate similar images, but then I cannot buy those credits. So I figure out probably the Photoshop can do some of the similar AI functionality there, but definitely I think different AI tools have different features, but then they have different costs. I think AI company also trying to make money based on different features as well. So I think in this kind of world, how to use different AIs into different creative process might be a smarter way to work with. Because, for example, I think like Getty got a lot of great images for company, but then they do have a lot of like the AI feature to clean the background, but definitely they cannot to be a creator. But Lumi is the one like you can use that platform to create images. So probably you want to give it a try. I think the point is not even probably using one AI tool, keeping an eye on different AI tools, and then really think about or treat them as a piece of the art process, like how they can support you in the creative process and how they can help you to achieve your goal. That could be something to explore. Yeah. Speak to that, I'm also wanting to ask you, like, have you got any like challenges or any considerations when you do AI generated content?
Oh, yes. It's interesting. I was saying earlier that I had this conversation with someone who was expressing concern about there's job security. There's people are going to know, like if you're using ChatGPT to write something, we'll just use that as an example. For my own journey, this idea of the prompt has become so important, because if you get let's say you put in like, please give me a marketing plan. It's going to spit out the same thing that it spits out for everybody. But if you say, hello, ChatGPT, you are a marketing expert with 25 years experience selling, we'll say clothing, and your audience that you're looking for is the demographic of tweens, and you're trying to sell these jeans. So if you give it all these prompts to tell it who it is, what it's looking for, what audience it's aiming towards, it's going to spit out a much different response. And so a lot of my job as a creative director that wants to always be using AI as much as possible, because we have limited staff, we have limited time, right? Let's use the tools that we have. And so it's always about you have to have the ability to craft the prompt in order to really get something specialized. And then, very important, you can't just use that. You have to apply your own skills and your own knowledge, because whatever role you're in, you are a specialist. You are very good at what you do, and you're bringing this human experience, this human connection. And so you have to look at it and distill it into that. It's that final step. So that's something that I've faced a lot, and just this idea of like, I kind of always joke when people are nervous about their job. I'm like, have you seen what it spits out? Like you're okay. Like it's not yet there. And I don't know if it ever will be, because the human experience, the human brain is just so complex. And
Yeah.
I had a colleague talk about, they said, I don't like to use AI because you can run it through a tool that will show whether it's AI formulated or not. And honestly, my response is, who cares? This is a tool that, I think if you do that last step and you make it your own, it is, that's the element that you pull it out from AI into human. But even if it fails, then that, and it passes through the ChatGPT indicator, I just don't care, because as long as the message is given to my client or my audience, that's the point. It's kind of like when photography first came out, everyone was like, oh no, this is going to ruin art. This is unacceptable. There were so many critics of photography for the same reason. I mean, AI is a little bit different, but the implications of it are a little different. But as far as a tool goes, it is just going to become the norm. And so, we do our best to pull it out from the AI realm and make it powerful and human, but we're not always going to win. And I say, perfection is the enemy of done. That is one of my sayings. And we just have to get it out sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. There's a little bit joke like recently when we're talking about, okay, our brand personality is around humanity, more like uplifting, empowering. Where currently I work for Udemy, right? And we're selling courses and we are learning platform. But then the fun things like we're talking about human, but then we're using AI generated projects. So
Yes,
you
the
know,
dichotomy.
yeah, that's a pretty fun fact. It's like uh, we're telling people where to go, but then we're break their rules, and then we're creating a new phenomenon there as well. So I'm thinking
Yeah,
about that's how the creative should looks like, because when people talk about the creativity, it means sometimes it causes you pain. The process is really
yeah, very painful.
complicated. Yeah, it's really painful. But then when you experience that, when you're get into a comfort zone for a while, which means you might need to have a mindset to be challenged by people, by tool, by technology. So
Yeah.
I think that's why when you're mentioning about like when you're doing like a campaign, like we're creating a campaign where achieve a business goal there, but then all the tools, all the people around there are all served to that goal. So sometimes I feel like people might think about themselves a lot. I don't think like we should have that mindset when you are trying to creating something, because you're creating a design, you're building a products for people, and then you have to achieve that goal and fill that needs there. So whatever
Right.
the tools you're using, I think that's totally fine, because we were just trying to save time, save money. But then I think there's another way I'm really interested about, like how the iterations looks like in the AI world, because I know a lot of startups, they're trying to build AI features, and
Hmm.
I heard in different tech company, they're trying to merge the AI features, but also they're trying to expand the AI user case in different industry, even for like farmer market as well. So I think for the upcoming months or years, I'm really curious about to see how the AI can be affect into the art area, because I think San Francisco is not only about tech. I think San Francisco is a really historical city, and it has a lot of cultural benefits. I would say it's a cultural treasure
Yes. Yeah.
city. So I think before pandemic, the reason I joined the ballet is like I'm also coming from artistic family, so I really like
Yeah.
that atmosphere. Even I was in the Bay, but then after that, I can see how the tech can affect the art, but then people still love those historical environment there. So
Right.
yeah. So I'm so happy to see when I left the ballet, and then you lead a team and then have a pretty fantastic work around AI, and then it makes me feel like, okay, this world can be better in different areas. Yeah, I want to take a pause here to see if anyone have any questions. So feel free to jump in the chat. In the meantime, do you have any questions, Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Sky, for sharing. That's the first time I hear about like how someone like as a designer, right, like integrate the AI very deeply into their workflow is very interesting. What are some of the biggest challenge you see in that? Like, what are some of the things you feel like as a designer and how we can change our mindset, right? Like, especially like regarding AI.
I think I have come to view it as a tool just like Photoshop. I mean, Photoshop is just so mind-blowingly dense, right?
Mhm.
There's so many options and directions to go that it can be overwhelming. So then I just say, you know, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So it's like as I get to know AI, I get really frustrated by, oh, how do I make this design that I have in my head? How do I morph it into that? And so for me, one of the biggest pain points of AI is that translation from my head to the screen. And my workaround for that is I go find art that is, and you know, ethically, it is what it is. I don't have an answer for the ethics of it, other than the photographer goes out and shoots a photo of someone and then uses that as
Mhm.
art. Where does that mean that it's, you know, its own, where does that person that's photographed be in that process? So there's
Mhm.
always ethical concerns in a lot of art process and a lot of artworks. But you know, I'll
Mhm.
go find some images that I think are close to what I want to do or have a vibe, and I'll feed them into Poppy AI along with or Midjourney, and I'll say, or Free Pick. I really like their AI tools. I'm sure there's Mini. I know there's Mini, but those are the ones that I really gravitate towards. And I'll say, give me the prompt for this, and I'll take that prompt and then I'll shape it. And to me, that's the biggest pain point is that friggin' prompt. It's like you can have something in mind in your mind's eye, but it's like, how do you word it so that the model knows what it is you want?
Mhm.
So that, and then it's that, you know, I also, there's a part of me that just wants to put it in and get what I want and then be done, right? I want to go
Mhm.
home and I want to do whatever. But that's not the process for me. You can't end there. So that's a big one. And I think the other one is that balance between uncanny valley, um, super modeled, like obviously AI, like
Yep.
to that, and then the human art touch.
Mhm.
There's a balance there that is very tricky and is very finicky. And you know, you can lean into it being AI, of course, but that should be an intentional decision that's backed up by um, the where, why, how of the campaign or of the design or of the, you know, project you're working on. So it's actually the same old story that's always been. How do I get from my head, what's in my head, to
Mhm.
the page? That's for me one of the biggest challenges.
That's very interesting. In my experience, like using AI, sometimes I just find it quite stubborn in some way, right? Like it's very hard to make the AI the change in my mind. Like it's very hard to alter that, and sometimes I just like forget about it. I will take your work.
Yeah.
I will do it my own. I'll alter it. But I guess similar to what you mentioned, kind of the uncanny valley, right? Like so how we can make it more integrated, and I think like
Mhm.
from the workflow perspective, right? Like so I think
Mhm.
AI is still very early phase
Mhm.
implemented into the workflow. Potentially in the future, I agree with that. I think it's more and more as a tool will be integrated into creative work. So
Mhm.
I think that's a very interesting trend that we are experiencing today.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to get more and more powerful, and I also have the fear that at some point it's going to render us obsolete,
Mm,
or we're no longer going to be able to tell the difference
mm.
between what's AI and what's made by a human.
Do
Um,
you think that's a good thing, or like do you think that's scary? What's your reaction on that?
I think it can be both things at the same time. I think that it can be scary as an artist, this idea, or as a copywriter, or as a marketing expert to just be rendered
Mhm.
obsolete by this friggin' machine, that thinks it knows or whatever, or that is so intelligent beyond me that I'm outgunned. So I think that there's that fear. To what I said earlier, I also, though, at the same time, believe that human beings, I mean, our brain, we just, it's like with music. I'm a musician, and I'm just constantly amazed how we can take the same um, chords or the same notes that everyone has access to, and they're really limited, but we can just continue to make really interesting music out of it. And so I think the same way I rest assured, I guess, in a
Mm.
way, that as long as we are continue allowed to be creative, we will continue to create in really interesting and new and innovative ways that a computer just will never be able to replicate, because our brain is so complex, so fascinating, and so undiscovered that I
Mhm.
think that will always be with us, from my perspective.
I'm very curious. One of the concept is like, do you think AI will change the definition of art? Especially
No.
like you are very tied together with the museum, with ballet, with the traditional form of art. We have been seeing today AI is output more and more content and
Mhm.
generating like so-called art piece or images, right? Do you think like it would change art in the future?
So I do think it's going to change. I think it's going to change what the public expect. I
Mm,
think it's going to change the public expectation, but it's not going to happen that fast. I guess I'm thinking in terms of generation. Like the generation that grows up on AI is going to consider that to be normal. And so there's the artwork, the art piece at the Museum of Modern Art. That's the big wall. I forget the artist, and it's just this constantly morphing colors, and it's such an interesting liquid space, that to my eye is like, wow, that's really wild. It's like Miro back in the day, Jean Miro, with his, or even Jackson Pollock, even Picasso. It's like, that was like, wow, that's really wild. And now we just look at it and we're like, yeah, that just is. And I think that's going to probably happen with AI. It's just going to become part of the visual lexicon that we're used to. Um, and as far as how it's going to shape brands, I think that from a brand perspective, my instinct is that we are going to be expecting more and more quality from brand campaigns as marketing starts to use tools more and more starts to use AI tools, because the quality that it produces, if used correctly and then shaped by really smart people, it's so high. The quality is just such a high level of quality, of concept, of taglines, of the copy that you're using. Just everything about it can just be so powerful, as long as you're following, some guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the public's just going to be expecting that more and
Yeah.
more. Mm-hmm.
I realize like people in this speedy world right now, people are really looking for something new, even they don't like
Mm-hmm.
change. So
Yeah.
for example, like photography, they're looking for more models. We need to have more photos every day. We need to have the same models in different facial expressions, in different postures. And then, okay, we need a new email campaigns, and then can you do that really fast, like 2 days? This is just a fun fact, guys. I started to work on like presentation tech, but then turns out into a brand refresh. Some
Right.
of the similar stories, like I realized like when AI fell into people's life, there are a lot of like it just low efforts cost to some change, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so people are not expecting to have a longer creative process. So
Right.
for
Yeah.
example, like the agency, sometimes we pay a lot and we allow them to creating something half of years, couple of months, but now
Right.
we need them to do really fast. But if you cannot do that fast, you cost too many money in the
You
company,
fall behind.
and
Mm-hmm.
you fall
Mm-hmm.
behind for sure.
Yeah.
That's why it's like we're in a one way we're thinking this is something wrong. We should stop doing that. But in another way, people always be engaged by those new
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I think for me, like my big challenge is like how I can find the balance
Yeah.
in this kind of world. It's like you have to keep some of the rules, you have to keep some of the process there, but then how you can smartly and then smoothly fit into the new technology and then to achieve the goals, but not based on destroying people's life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about like people keep complaining some stuff, but then they got visibility, they got benefits, they got bonus
Mm-hmm.
from it. It's kind of interesting things now. So I'm really curious about like how people can convince themselves to accept something they make them feel fear, feel terrifying. So I feel like we're not training AI, we're training ourselves to be
Yeah, we are training ourselves.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I will say one other point just to this group of people, that I've been in this role for 4.5 months. I would not be able to do this role, at least as well as, not to claim that I'm doing it well, but I'm doing my job and I'm doing it successfully because of AI and because it's embedded into my workflow. So I'm not just using it creativity with my creative side, I'm using it with my own personal workflow. So every Sunday night, I've got all this stuff in my head. I just take my phone in bed and I list it out to ChatGPT and say, make me a schedule for the next few days. And it takes care of it. And it's in the same chat that I always do it. So it kind of, I remind it sometimes what it is. It's a, executive assistant. And then I also have to write so many friggin' emails, it's like, oh my gosh, the emails. So I use voice to text. Turn on Google and say what I need to email, and then I pop that into Chat GPT. Don't use any names, don't use any confidential information, but then take that, drop it into Chat GPT, into the same one that I always use for rewrite help, and then it spits it out. And then, of course, I have to tweak it a little, but it cuts that time down by 70, 80%. But then the other key part of that is that every week, every few days, you need to delete that from Chat GPT, because you don't want that information about what you're doing to stay in a space like that. So there's a few key things: no confidential information, and you have to delete it pretty
Mm.
often. But it is such a powerful tool for me to just rip through my to-do list and my emails.
Yeah, I remember like previous years, like if you trying to shorten the efforts on the creative process, you have to work hard. You
Yeah, right.
have
Now
to
you just have
after,
to work smart.
yeah, yeah. And now it's like it's hard to say no in some situations, and then you have to move things really fast, and then
So fast.
you have to make people happy in
You
different
have to be
situations.
superhuman in a way.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
we're benefits from AI in different ways.
Thanks for sharing. And just like one quick last round. I didn't see any questions in the chat, but anyone want to come on to the stage, you can unmute and can like we'll take probably like two more questions for Sky, and then we will get into our next activity. But thanks for sharing. I think like it's very insightful.
Yes. And I also can talk, touch on soft skills if anybody has any questions about those. I'm always happy, as I said at the beginning, I'll say to this group that I take mentoring and supporting up and coming designers very seriously. I think it's a really important role for more senior designers to do. It was done with me. Like I said at the beginning, Francis was so skilled when I started to work with him, and I learned so much from him. He was very, very generous with his skill set, and I've just taken that, and ran with it. But I'm always also happy to connect on LinkedIn. I'm happy to review portfolios with people. I'm very open to that. So, and then if anybody has any questions, of course.
Yeah. Thanks for very generous of that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Like,
Sharing that. Yeah.
absolutely.
I do want to mention one of the your strengths in the soft skill is like I'm not a person feel comfortable to say no and then to sell some of the big ideas to the leadership at the beginning of my career path. I think I learned that from you as well. So probably one question for you is what kind of the mindset you should have when you're trying to say no? Like,
Mhm.
right? Because sometimes when I was trying to say no, I full of the fairness, full of the consequence come to my
Yeah.
mind. I'm just really scared to say something out,
Mhm.
even in a meeting, because sometimes you have to argue
Mhm.
your standpoint immediately, but not
Mhm.
after the meeting, right? So
Right.
how change your mindset during that
Mhm.
situation? That's what I really want to know.
Yeah, that is a really big challenge that I just see over and over again, and I myself face when a senior leader comes to you and says, we need this, or we want to actually change this direction, whatever the scenario is. For me, I always frame it in what the impact is going to be of doing that. So let's say that you're working on a project and you've done 80% of the work and you're about to meet your deadline, but the senior person comes and says, "Hey, we really want to go this way." I never say no. I always just say that, you know, I love the idea of exploring more. However, if we do that, we're already this far into the project. And unfortunately, if we do that, we're not going to meet the deadline, which is also going to affect this print or this campaign. And I worry that that's going to affect the long-term quality of the campaign. So if you're willing to take that chance and affect these deadlines, I never say no. They're running the ship, but I always give them the consequences of the action. Even if you're a new person and a senior person, I do this all the time because I've got like 500% more work than what I can do, and more is always being given to me. So it's important to always stay neutral. I always stay neutral because it's not up to me as far as what what unfolds. But what I do say is that unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth to take that on with my current workload. However, if you want me to do this, here are the projects I'm working on currently. What would you like me to set down? So I just put the ball back in their court. Yes, I can do it. However, these projects are going to be affected. So which one would you like me to drop? And a lot of times they're like, oh, okay, then they help you shuffle. I mean, my role kind of as a creative director and a senior role at the museum is to help the people that I'm managing and people that I'm not managing, but that people, others that are, kind of on the ground doing kind of these day-to-day actions, is to help them manage their workload. And not a lot of managers think that way, but I'm very, very pro that. I definitely am always checking in because it helps them learn how to do it for themselves.
I do remember like people have a lot of great ideas, and then they came to you and they say, "Oh, can we do this? Can we do that?
Yeah.
To make that happen?" But then they kind of like didn't, step on the ground because they don't even know what caused by those action. Even
Right.
the action gonna be affect their own workload, even creating some troubles for themselves. Yeah, I think that's really smart because you're not only thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the teams at high level. And then so I think that's really convincible to the cross-functional teams as well because
Yeah.
they can now take that hot potato on their own hands, right? They need to think about like how the thing's gonna be affects everyone. But
Well, I want to also comment on the situation where it's not about a deadline. It's about, is that a smart move? It doesn't fit with the long-term strategy. Or you need to change the behavior of a department or of a group or of a person. So a lot of, as designers, we're constantly kind of the place where people go to get stuff, right? And they say, oh, this, I need this, this is very important. And I think one of the things that I started to do at the Asian Art Museum immediately was say, we can't turn that around in one day, because we are now focusing on becoming a world-class institution. And in order to do that, we have to approach things strategically, and we have to approach things the correct way. And turning around a brochure in one day or whatever it is, it doesn't work that way, and we're not going to maintain that quality. And so that's kind of one of the things that I do as well, is I talk about not just the impact on the deadlines, but the impact on the strategy and the impact on the overall goal of the organization. And I think that's a very valid reason to not do something. It doesn't always fly, but to me, it's a very valid point as well.
That's pretty a good point. I heard about like if when you move to your next level of your career path to be senior, to be the associate creative lead, like principal product designer,
Right.
turn from like IC to manager level, like you have to build your views in different level. How you're thinking about your business goals, how you achieve the goals in different ways with your team. I think that's definitely sometimes make the vital changes.
It's very hard. It can be a challenging position to be in, to be the bad guy sometimes.
Yeah. My director just told me the same things. Like, I hate to be the person to say no all the time, but I was the person in the team.
Yes. Yeah, that's your role, and once you
Yeah.
accept that and you learn to navigate it, then you just do it. And my experience is that people change, teams change the behavior. You just have to say no a few times, or
Yeah.
they say, and they can
Yeah.
start to trust you as well. Yeah.
Yeah. If you keep saying yes, and then you become to be a troublemaker for
Yeah.
a team. 'Cause
Right.
you-
Fruit it, yeah.
the leadership let me to do one campaign in 2 days, and then I say yes, I can do it, and then the leadership gonna come to you every time they want to have a 2 days campaign. Yeah, you have to set the rule.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing, Sky. So if you guys miss part of the chat today, we usually will upload our events recording to our YouTube channel. If you are not subscribed, feel free to scan and subscribe. You'll get the latest podcasts and events